Hello and welcome from wherever you're tuning in from today. Please remember to type into the chat box your name and location where you're joining us from today. Today's webinar is titled FM Credentials Benefits Research, Understanding the Value of FM Credentials. Today's presenter is Kristen Hurtado, PhD, Professor, School of Sustainable Engineering and the Built Environment at Arizona State University. Also joining us today are Lauren Kruger and David Deckard. David and Lauren, would you like to tell the audience a bit about yourselves and your time with IFMA?
Yes. Hi, everyone. My name is Lauren Kruger. I am the Director of Sales Operations for IFMA. I've been with IFMA for 10 years and happy to be on this webinar today.
My name is David Deckard. I am Program Support Specialist for PD. I work in the department at IFMA that develops courses. I am also IFMA's instructor liaison, so anything that touches an instructor usually goes through me in some form or factor. Happy to be on the call. And Kristen, if you'll take it away, we will go from here.
All right. Hello, everyone. I'm Kristen Hurtado, joining you from sunny and somewhat cloudy Arizona. Happy to be here today and a part of this effort, a part of this research. I have a background in facilities management as well as construction management. I spent some time in industry before coming over to the dark side of research and teaching. And I see we've got someone also from a couple of people from Arizona. So I have to say this ASU, go Devils. So here I am, and really, like I said, excited to be here to share this with you. I'm kind of an odd nut in that I also have degrees and specializations in education and training and professional development. So I'm a super nerd, and I love all things research, FM, and education overall, master's in education, things like that. And so, like I said, real happy to be here. And it's super refreshing, amazing, and excited that IFMA as an organization is looking at this specific topic because thankfully there are so many options when it comes to training and education and facilities management. 10, 15 years ago, there really wasn't. And so here we are today with lots of options. And what a great organization to also make sure that their options are providing value and measuring the benefit of that. There's a lot of training out there that you'll see and lots of smoke and mirror and sales and things like that. But to actually, from a research perspective, measure that, I give IFMA a lot of kudos for checking in on that. And so let's dive right in and see what kinds of things we found in our research. Ashley, anything about the questions? I mean, I'll take questions as we go, I guess. So put it in the chat. Let me know what questions you have, and I'm happy to answer them as we go forward. Some of you may be at a point where you're trying to determine, what credentials and training is right for you. So it's great we have IFMA here to also answer those kinds of questions. So personal questions, research questions, come one, come all. Happy to know what's on your mind and answer your questions for you. So for today's agenda, for the next 30 to 40 minutes, I'm going to go through IFMA credentials, what they are, some overview basics. Then we'll talk through this specific research and the study we did, talk through what results we found, the ROI specifically, some of the benefits and compelling factors to get your IFMA credentials. And then the question that everyone hopefully gets clear in their minds and something we'll be investigating further in research is why should your company pay for you, or why should you pay for your employees to get some form of credential or training? I'm part of a larger group, not only at Arizona State University, but across 7 or 8 different universities. We're a consortium of researchers, and we all love facilities management. We're weird, but we're in a group. And so we do a lot of different things, not just in terms of this type of research through IFMA, but we also have organizational change, training, professional development, and we're very, very embedded with industry. So we work directly with companies and folks that have challenges in facilities management in changing and transforming their organizations. Some of the other things that we've done in addition to this report, a lot of benchmarking reports you'll see through IFMA's RBI, talent development, workforce studies, all kinds of neat things. So if you've got interest in other areas, please reach out to me and or Nick Rocha. As researchers, we've seen a lot of things in a lot of different industries as well. So facilities management and construction is really our base, our home base, but we've also had the pleasure of working and dipping our toes in other industries like IT, healthcare, medical services, and things like that. And we've seen a lot of different things from different organizations. So big, small, public, private. Everyone thinks the Fortune 5s and 10s have it all figured out and know what's going on in industry. We don't see that on the research side of things. So it's very humbling to be able to work with a lot of organizations, but also at the same time, they kind of unilaterally have the same challenges. And towards the end of the presentation, we'll share some of the data that we did gather through this specific survey about some of the broader industry challenges that folks are facing and kind of where we're at with that. So again, some of you may see symbols and companies you recognize here. You are in good company. We have done research across a variety of professional associations like IFMA and also individual companies and municipalities and so forth. And, you know, we're all kind of in this together as we would know and generally recognize. I was listening to a news podcast this morning through the Wall Street Journal, and you know, it's very common to think with everything that's going on with our economy, interest rates and workforce shortages and things like that, that there are some companies that are like sheltered from this, and we're not seeing that's the case. So when we think about upskilling, what we're going to talk about today, all of these companies are struggling with finding good workforce, retaining them, promoting them, and keeping them. And we see upskilling and training as being a direct component into that, keeping your people, making them feel recognized, providing that investment. So again, our question is, you know, why do that? And I see some questions have popped up already, so I'm going to go ahead and talk through them. So the first question we have is from an individual named Glenn Jukno. Sorry for butchering your last name. And Glenn, your question was, you're looking to figure out what certs would work for my current and future positions. So that's a great question, and something that's probably on everyone's mind is, hey, what should I choose? What's best for me? And I'm sure Lauren and David can speak to this, but maybe we dip a little bit into the presentation first and talk through some stuff. And then maybe after that, you can kind of see, I mean, IFMA does have 3 different options. So Lauren and David, do you want to table that one until towards the end? Okay. Next up, we have a question from Aaron. Aaron question is, seen a lot lately from Pro FM. What gives IFMA Credentials the edge over Pro FM, IWM, and some others? And again, we'll be talking through that specific question here in just a sec, Aaron. So thanks for your question. And I think the questions will stay here, so I'll go back and make sure that at that point in time that I've addressed it. And if not, we'll address it from David and Lauren. So jumping in right here about the project itself and what all that we researched and did. As I mentioned to you before, we've had a long history with IFMA, and IFMA's had a long history of providing valuable research reports. If you're not familiar with the Research Benchmarking Institute, Nick Rocha can definitely share that with you. I believe it's being provided as part of this presentation, the link to the site. But if you're looking to determine things like, you know, what's best practice for space planning? How much should I be paying my people? What's the overall benchmark for O&M costs? Things like that. And in addition to this specific study, there's a lot out there. Don't just kind of like Google things and take the first result you get. Like, this research is very robust, and IFMA's hired researchers to actually conduct the research and provide you with valuable information through robust methodologies and research methods. But this specific report, what IFMA was looking to do is determine the value of their credentials to the industry. Like I mentioned at the beginning of my presentation, not all companies do provide employees with the financial backing to get training. And so it's very important that that ROI or payback is seen and measured right away. Again, there's lots out there that there wasn't about 10 or 15 years ago in terms of training, which is awesome, but less than 90% of them measure the impact of their training. So cool, here's a webinar, here's some training, blah, blah, here we go. And then those who release it never measure, is it providing value? What are the benefits? Why are people taking it? And what does the future look like after you have your credential? So again, kudos to IFMA to doing this now twice. The first study was conducted in 2017, and there's a link there if you want to take a look at that as well. As I mentioned, there are 3 different IFMA credentials that were measured. There's a Certified Facility Manager, or the CFM, the Facility Management Professional, or the FMP, and then the Sustainable Facility Professional, or the SFP. So again, if you're not familiar, there are 3 different options provided by IFMA, and these were the 3 that were measured directly. So taking a step back as where IFMA has been since 1992, which was when the CFM first got started, there's over 16,000 IFMA credentials that have been awarded, individual credentials to industry professionals. I mean, that's just amazing where IFMA has come, and the raising of the tide of the level of professionalism of our industry. I think a lot of studies and work has shown the maturity of different industries, and training and career paths and professional development make those industries more professional, more mature, more established. So that the hope is, in the end, young people choose this as a career path because there is a path or multiple paths. That 16,000 plus individual credentials awarded has seen a 70% increase since 2017. So major, once again, kudos to IFMA for continuing to provide that, and that type of volume increase is pretty wild, pretty large. So again, I think I've talked about this already quite a bit, but the measurement piece is huge. When we talk about training, those that are in the training space know there's lots of different ways that you can measure satisfaction of people who take your training, but even beyond that, some sort of numerical quantification of an investment. Training is an investment. You spend your time and your money and or your company's money, just kind of the mental effort that's all involved. And so, at the end of the day, it is an investment, and most of us have to justify, even though there may or may not be funding available for your training at your company. Oftentimes you have to have that conversation with your boss. You have to provide a business case of sorts to say, why should you get part of the pot of money or maybe reimbursed? And so at the end of the day, the companies and individuals need to see the benefit, which is, once again, something that every training provider should do. So how did we do it? Well, and I see a couple other questions popping in. I'll address those shortly. So how did we do it? So since we had done this back in 2017, we had a really great idea of, how to measure things, and maybe some gaps and areas we wanted to refocus on. So we took a look at the survey, made some adjustments, did some testing, and then released that survey and expanded it upon the lessons learned from 2017. There were some quantitative and qualitative questions. So, money, dollars and cents, percentages, but then there were some other softer sides of things that we measured. And all in all, we got 1,300 responses. So the first question was in our minds that we wanted to address is, what does the average IFMA credential holder look like? Did it look like me? Did it look like you? What's kind of what we're seeing in terms of just most IFMA credential holders? So typically, it was an individual somewhere between 44 to 57 years old, so somewhat mid-career, with about 18 years of FM experience on average. 81% did have a college degree, so that was very encouraging to see. Not necessarily in facilities management. In fact, most folks did not study facilities management as part of their college degree. Training has mostly been on the job, which I think is always going to be present and is always necessary, but that was by far the primary way that they had learned about facilities management. And over half had other credentials as well. So very encouraging to see, especially when your formal training and degree is not in the field you're currently in. It's very common to pursue multiple credentials to sort of fill in those gaps and awareness and understanding. And the average person earned more than $100,000 per year. So if that looks like you should be smiling because you're in good company. And if that doesn't look like you should know that these are great opportunities, and this could be eventually where you end up. I always like to give everyone a preview of what we're going to talk about in detail later. So if you have to leave now, this is the last slide you see, but please don't leave. The good news is that across all the research and the surveys and the interviews and the analysis that we did, all of those IFMA credentials had an immediate ROI within the first year of getting a credential. So very reassuring, very nice to see that versus maybe some others that may exist, that the benefit really happens, later in terms of the professional development and actual impacts in terms of benefits you would receive. We did calculate a mathematical return on investment. So monetizing the investment, monetizing the return, and we found that that was 16 to 1, the average ROI across 5 years. So 16 to 1. I'm going to say that again. Most of us would go to Vegas on that. Most of us go to Vegas on that under less. And so, all joking aside, it's a great number. Now you may be thinking, why 5 years? So 5 years is really important because, in a lot of organizations, the wheels take a little bit of time to move in terms of getting some sort of promotion or benefit or increased job responsibilities. And so, cool, I got my training, boom, immediately, give me a promotion. Doesn't always happen at the click of a button. So it's kind of important to measure that trajectory. Some folks may also choose to kind of do this on the side, not tell their employer because they may be seeking other career options. So again, that 5-year term was pretty important, we thought. Next up, 40% received a promotion after getting their IFMA credential. And we asked, do you believe this promotion was because of your IFMA credential? We didn't just say, hey, have you gotten anything cool where you take credit for it? No, we were looking specifically for, okay, now that you had it, did you get that promotion because of your credential? In a lot of public institutions, I mentioned we've worked with public, private, and all different types of institutions. A lot of public institutions, they tend to have a hierarchy, a career ladder, which is very clear, and it does require training to get to the next level. So in those, it's very clear to see. In others, you're kind of paving the path at your organization saying, hey, I've been, technician, now can I get promoted to supervisor? And so you kind of make that career path. But 40% did get that promotion after getting their IFMA credential because of their IFMA credential. 86% of the folks saw that the credentials did have good to excellent reputation among FM professionals. And that's important in a lot of ways that you can probably imagine and guess already. To be relevant, IFMA has to, continually measure and see, hey, are we achieving relevancy? The things that David and Lauren and their teams develop for the professional development and training, are those current, relevant, important to industry? And this is showing and seeing that they really are. And then IFMA continues to uphold a great reputation across the industry, so that if you do get your credential, maybe your company says, you need to get an IFMA to IFMA's FMP to get to the next career ladder. Great, you get it. And then let's say you go to another company, that other company also values your FMP. So it isn't as if you're getting narrowly minded training that's only really helpful for certain organizations. It's industry wide, which is a good thing to have. Point number 5 makes me angry. 63% of respondents received some form of financial support by their employer. So not everyone is getting it paid for, which is very frustrating, especially in this economy. And some studies have shown, and things you'll read out in the media as to why folks are moving on or changing careers or jobs or employers. Some of it is because they don't feel that they're being invested in or going anywhere within that company, which includes professional development and training. So 63%, it's higher than it was in 2017, but gosh, given everything we've been through, it's still not very high. And so part of the continued research is going to be unpacking that. We'll have another study where we look at the employer's perspective of IFMA's credentials. So this has been so far, just in 2022, just individual employees, so individuals' perspective of the ROI, but we plan to look at the company's perspective of the ROI to them. And so circling back, of the 63%, half of them either got complete support and 13% got partial support. So yeah, we give you, $500 a year, $1,000 a year, here you can have this, versus, hey, we're going to pay for the whole thing. Obviously, it's nice to have something either way, but again, in this economy, it seems that it may be a deal breaker for some employees. All All right, let me see. I'm going to check back in on some of these questions. Okay. Okay. Yeah, all of those we're getting to. Sorry, I feel like I'm going too slow for all the questions. Okay, so I'm going to tell you more about the demographics because a lot of you are probably thinking, okay, cool results, but like, who did you measure? What was kind of their overall background, and are they like me? Apart from being average, the average profile. So high level across the US and internationally was covered. So we had a large chunk of folks, from North America and so forth, but we also measured across the globe. IFMA is the International Facilities Management Association, so it was not prescribed to be a specific country. It was global, and like I said, great representation there. When we look at statewide, if you want to find out where your state response rate ranked, but we did get a large amount of states covered as well. Those of you that did answer the survey, if you're on this call, thank you. And those of you that didn't, you just don't have your credential yet, and so we'll be bugging you in 3 to 4 years. Canada, again, we saw lots of responses there. Age and gender. So we did see actually a pretty good even keel from Gen Y all the way through baby boomer in terms of the responses. So fairly representative. Some didn't indicate their generational affiliation. And then the demographics in terms of gender, 20% female, rest were male. Education-wise, we talked about this, 81% have a college degree, with 41%, being a bachelor's, 33% being a master's, and then we have some with other levels of degrees and so forth. Salary, half earned more than $100,000 a year. Of course, we had folks earning more, but that's kind of where most folks landed. 39% did have on-the-job training, which was the most common. So I saw there was a question about that from Shrivnas, and it was primary training has been on-the-job training. That's great. Then what's the role of IFMA? So as we mentioned before, when we look at folks that have their degrees or they have training, a lot of them don't have it specifically in facilities management. So you land yourself into what was fondly called by IFMA about a decade ago, probably, in the Facilities Management Journal, the accidental profession, which is, hey, I found myself in facilities. I came from finance, or, I came up through the trades, or whatever it might be. And you've got these shoes to fill, and you typically fill them and your confidence with training. Right off the bat, any organization is going to hopefully give you some sort of mentor or someone who's kind of showing you the way. That doesn't go away. But what is still needed is that formal training where you get industry standard, best in class, what's happening outside in the industry overall type of training. So we're not saying on-the-job training is the only way to facilities management. We're just looking to see how many folks consider that, an additional training bucket. And it is. And it's funny too, Shrivnas, we didn't ask that, we didn't have that option in 2017 in the survey and when we did the research. And then I personally read all 250 text-based fill-in-the-blank comments, and everyone said on the job. And so I said, okay, well, in 2022, that's going to be an option instead of having people write it in, because we acknowledge it is a form of training. It's not formal and it's not all that you need, but most of us do get some form of mentorship or someone kind of showing us the ropes. So you get that. But what we're looking at is kind of outside of that, what else is going on. So we do see here, that there's a fair amount that 5% say none. I just get kind of thrown into it and people show me the way and I just figure it out. Others get some form of, in this case, IFMA sponsored professional education was 14%, 12% took university courses, 11% took FM certificates, bachelor's, master's, so on and so forth. Either in FM or related to FM. So it isn't just which one is right for me, it's typically which ones are right for me. And again, acknowledging that you do get a fair amount of coaching on the job was something that we didn't acknowledge in 2017 and needed to acknowledge here. So I hope that answers your question. All right. In terms of FM experience, we saw quite a broad range, which was great to see. More new blood kind of coming into the industry. And again, we said specifically in facilities management. So, other related fields didn't really factor in because again, they're your past, your history, not necessarily your future in facilities management. And so 18 years was about the average number of years of experience for most facilities managers. We had a decent portion that was over 20 years. And so that was also something we've known and seen in the past. Okay. So hopefully now you have a picture of tracing the threads of who we measured and what their sort of bios were. And then going forward, I already gave you the preview of the results, but let's dive a little bit deeper. There are a fair amount of folks that have at least one FM credential, but a fair amount that do have multiple. So we do find that folks commonly like to have a combination. And Lauren and David can answer questions about that specifically, but definitely there's some good combos there to be had across the variety of IFMA credentials. Oops. Sorry. And then we looked at just sort of time scale, the respondents, when did they get their credentials? And so a good chunk of them, 50%, was within the past 5 years. And the reason that's helpful and important is that we know their opinions are more recent. Again, we're looking at the ROI across 5 years because those benefits may not kick in right away or immediately, depending on the size and complexity and bureaucracy of your organization, company you work for. So again, that's very helpful to see that this data is very relevant and very recent. So we're not talking to people back from the 90s and saying, yeah, do you remember what happened a couple of decades ago? So there's that. Next up, in terms of benefits, we wanted to know, okay, there's typically a variety of factors, compelling reasons as to why you want to get your credential. And a lot of folks, not surprisingly, education and training benefits you. We see that, we know that, we understand that. Not necessarily it's being required for something very, specific end. And so here's kind of the breakout by credential. We thought it might be helpful to look through that, but majority, again, it's that recognition, that personal, professional development, and so on and so forth. And then the next bigger chunk is, ooh, I'm in this new job with this new role and I need to figure out, hey, how does this industry work? How do other people do it? When you work at one organization for 10, 15, 20 years, you know how that organization does it really well. But what about industry? Is that organization really best in class? And that's where training and credentials really help you understand that. All right, let me check in. So there is a question, and I think I could probably answer this, but Lauren and David can chime in, from Manuel about, do I need some college courses before I pursue the IFMA credentials? The answer is no. IFMA credentials do not require any sort of degree. There is a requirement for the CFM, and I'll let Lauren or David speak to that, but degrees, no, there's no degrees required.
Correct. There is no degree that is required to pursue any of the IFMA credentials. If you are looking to attain the CFM certification, there are eligibility requirements that you must meet before you can apply. One of them being if you have a bachelor's or master's PhD degree in any degree or program outside of facility management, you do have to have at least 5 years of experience in facility management among the 11 competencies that exam tests your knowledge on. If you graduate from an FM accredited degree program, you need 3 years of experience. So that's the only factor that comes into place if you were to have graduated from an accredited FM degree program. But otherwise, that just limits the amount of experience you need before you can apply. None of the credentials require any sort of degree in facility management.
Great. There was also a question that I may have addressed in passing, but I want to go back. Was from Augustus about how and when will you advise a credential becomes necessary. So basically, when should I get one? What was interesting as I went back to the slide about FM experience, there's folks with no basically experience, 0 to 3 years, getting their credential or credentials. And then there's folks with lots of experience. It kind of does depend on, where you're at in terms of your knowledge and some personal reasons about, where you want to go in terms of your future. So there is no kind of magic time at which it's needed. You kind of probably know, and if you're on this call, it's a good thing you're considering it. And I would suggest reaching out to Lauren, David, or myself to get some more personalized information. I've had other webinars and things in the past. I think some of them were run through IFMA about, how do I pick what's right for me? What's kind of the different options that are out there, and looking at, my personal circumstance. And again, a lot of it goes back to your background and your future. And so again, there's great options, and there's folks that pursue it at all ages of their industry experience. Check on this. All right. Yes, I'm going to address some of these here in a little bit. Okay. So scooting back to the detailed results, I think what's on most folks' minds is, what will I gain from an IFMA credential or IFMA credentials? So from a financial perspective, because everyone loves money, talk money first, over half of folks received a salary increase specifically due to their IFMA credential, which again, we asked very specifically. If you got our survey, we were wordy. We don't want to be taking credit for other reasons you may be getting an increase. And of that, the average salary increase was $5,400. And so that, average is looking pretty sweet, especially considering if you're part of the 63% that your company will most likely cover it. You just have to ask, or maybe will be reimbursed. And even if it's not, that amount you get back in your salary is about double, more than double what you would actually have to pay to get that back. So 29% did actually get a salary increase of over 5%. So, and I know it's hard to talk percentages now with inflation and how the economy is. And yes, you should already be getting paid more because of what's going on in the economy. But apart from that, just kind of looking at, hey, if I really hunker down, study, and get these credentials, and I make a plan to get my FMP in 3 months, what's kind of that ROI I'm going to see? And so just for that alone, that 5,400 is great to see, that it's providing that benefit. Okay, let me see here. There's a lot of personal questions about recommendations for what would be best for them. I wonder, Lauren, if there is a great starting point or website where some folks can go to figure out, of the 3 IFMA credentials, which one should they be pursuing, what's right for them?
Yeah, definitely. If you go to ifma.org, we have one of our tabs talks about a credentials overview, and it goes into some high-level overview for each of the credentials that IFMA offers. But the sales team also conducts a monthly webinar where we discuss many of the questions that you are posing today. We have all of those that are recorded and housed on IFMA's YouTube channel. So for those of you who can access YouTube, please check out IFMA's YouTube channel. We have almost a year's worth of videos now. We've been doing this monthly webinars that go into the background and the details of each credential. And Kristen, I don't know how much more information you want to give, but I'm happy to go through each of these if there's time at the end of the presentation as well. We can just go through them one by one.
Perfect. Yeah, I'll definitely be able to save you some time.
Awesome.
Sorry, I'm just reading some of these questions. They're so fascinating, and I want to really get, some of you are from different parts of the world, and just kind of coloring and sharing your perspective about, what's going on in your specific sector and geographic location. I will get to those. Okay. So money, financial impacts, and then earning potential. So let's say maybe you don't get that, sort of immediate promotion, or you get it, but whatever that is, if you're more forward looking, 71% of folks came back and they said, it can impact your potential even later. So that was also really strong and helpful to see that IFMA is providing the knowledge to where there is future value and future benefit. We asked supervisors, so we asked employers what their supervisors' feedback was then. Again, we're going to have a part 2 of this study where we do look at employers and their specific perspectives in a lot more detail. But at the end of the day, you ask for money for something, you're hopefully given it after, answering the questions and providing the value and business case. And then typically there's a follow through, be it at your performance review or, HR reaches out and says, hey, how'd you like that conference? How'd you like that training? How did it go? What were your takeaways? And so then they get that sort of feedback. And then the supervisors sometimes get pinged depending on the dollar value to say, okay, you spent some budget on training for your people, what was the value or how did it go? And, again, IFMA being very forward thinking wants to get that information to know that they're still being relevant. I mean, the worst thing you want to get into as a training provider is, cool, we've got training again to check a box, and never take a step back and go, okay, the people who take it like it, but the people who pay for it like it too. And so 78% believe their supervisors, immediate supervisors, found good to excellent value with IFMA credentials. So they're happy campers there too. So we talked about money, which again, I think is where most of our minds are at, but there are other benefits. So what else will you gain from getting an IFMA credential? What else did we measure? And this was the part of the story that I like the most because folks tell me their stories. I provided options, but people kind of expand on that. And definitely, as we saw, the reasons that are, credentials are pursued is also aligned with what they feel they've achieved at the end, which shows a good, full circle that you got what you paid for, which again is great in training to know that. So IFMA knows that now. Folks do see one of the top benefits they see from their credential, other than the monetary and promotion stuff we mentioned, is they get validation of their competencies as a facilities management. There were some comments in the chat and kind of questions/comments about how, being a jack of all trades and things like that. I think at the end of the day, a lot of us, we have experience in FM and related fields. And so when you have a validation that your knowledge is relevant and you have those competencies, that speaks volumes to you, and it also makes you more productive. Same thing with greater sense of value and self-worth, ties right into that as the second place benefit. Confidence in performing your job tasks. So again, some of us are those loyal till the end and will be at the same company for 20 or 30 years. And so you've seen what that company has done, but you've never really looked outside and known, that is the way to do it. So when you have that training, you get more confidence in performing your day-to-day stuff. Recognition among your peers. So gosh, those email signatures keep getting longer, right? 3 letters after your name. Well, that stands on its own and means a lot to folks among peers and superiors. Greater desire from the job market. And again, that's something we're going to be measuring in more detail in the next study. Desire to pursue organizational involvement. So it goes without saying, your company invests in you, you feel appreciated, and you want to, get a little bit more involved because they want to help you upskill. And, what was it, a quote? It's the scariest decision that like a supervisor has to make is, investing in your people, and they go. Well, what if you don't invest in them and they stay? So it's kind of a double-edged sword in that. So yeah, you will be more desirable from the job market, but at the same time, appreciating what your company has invested in you. Increase pay, like we talked about, and offered a job or new position. So again, just looking across the credentials, seeing that they all provide excellent, very good, and good value to the investment. So we asked for the money and we monetized it, but then we also have a catch-all question where we're like, okay, let's just make sure that the numbers we're seeing align to your feelings, and they did. So that was great to see. You can see it there broken out by credential. All right, so now, cool, I'm going to get benefits. Everything is aligning. I sign up for a reason. I feel like I got what I paid for, but now how much do I have to pay for in time? What do I actually have to personally invest? I always kind of pause at this because working at a university and knowing how the education systems work, a lot of folks kind of shudder at training and classes and school of that nature. So, this can vary greatly depending on your comfort with that. A lot of training you get into is, once you kind of get back into the swing of things and you're reading and kind of reading comprehension and testing and quizzing yourself is that there's a learning curve, and you peak and then keep going, and but until you reach that sort of tipping point, it may be a little bit of a struggle getting back into the swing of things. But overall, again, caveats aside, over half of folks spend about 20 to 50 hours studying. And again, that can vary greatly. You have your materials and you're studying and you're preparing for those exams, just kind of thinking through that. But, at the end of the day, half of a work week, spread across several weeks and months is not a huge time commitment when you really think about the benefits and what you would gain. Here at our university, we do a lot of scholarships, and we have great donors, and in my department specifically. And every year, without avail, there's money that goes unawarded. And so I always have to, and sometimes it's very unique scholarships, but I always have to monetize it for students and say, okay, the scholarship application takes about 2 hours to do. And they're like, oh, 2 hours. I have to write about myself. Writing your resume and an essay or a scholarship, those are the hardest things to do in life. I don't care who you are. Just writing about yourself is hard. And I go, okay, well, the average money that is awarded per scholarship, not the average, the lowest awarded is $500. So if you spend 2 hours and you get $500, that's $250 an hour. Totally worth it. And then they change their minds. So I think that's kind of some of the sell in this. There will be studying involved, but when you really look at the benefits, it's worth it. So here's going to the math of that ROI, the return on investment. Here's the factors we looked at and the average values. So I think I touched on earlier side, the average reported salary was just north of $100,000. That average salary increase was 5%. The amount due to the credential was just shy of $5,000. The average cost of most credentials that IFMA has is around $1,800. Average hours spent studying is 46. Cost of studying based on salary, just a little bit north of $2,000. And so the fees plus the study is around $4,000. So boom, the math works out. It becomes 16 to 1. If you want more detail on the math, that table and everything is included in IFMA's report. That way you can print it out and show it to your employers and say, look, here's what, the numbers came out. And as I covered in that first kind of preview slide, all the credentials across the board show an immediate ROI within that first year. So again, that's a good validation to have as a training entity to know that value is provided immediately. And then when you look at the 5-year picture, which again is sort of the typical time frame, that increase is still there and the ROI is 16 to 1. Obviously the qualitative stuff can't really be numerically measured and included in the return on investment calculation. But again, we went through that. We all know that's there. The personal benefits, the confidence, self-worth, and all those kinds of things are all baked into that. But there's no way to convert that to a number. Let's see. Yeah, the only true return captured in this is just the money. But again, still very high value there. Let's see. I think we're good. Okay. So going back to my earlier disappointment that 63% of employees are giving some form of financial support, which again is better than none, but still not as high as where I think lots of us would like it to be, expect it to be, and hope it to be, that companies are contributing to upskilling you and helping you throughout your career. Here's how it shook out. So 49 of those that how it was actually financially supported, 49% the company paid for all of it, 14% the company partially paid for it, and 35% of folks had to go it alone and pay for it themselves. But again, at 16 to 1, that benefit is still very much there. And again, I'm sorry, I hope there's some employers on here that are going, should I have some budget? And yes, you should, because we know that supervisors find value. 78% of those that had employees that got their credential came back and were like, yeah, wow, we really see this is great value. But that was higher than those that actually paid for it. So it's like, cool, you paid for yourself, got value. This is awesome. Keep paying for yourself. Yeah, that employee is probably going to go elsewhere. So we would like to see those numbers be a lot closer to each other and be closer to 100. That's how we know we're meeting the mark. Reputation. So 86% believe IFMA credentials have good to excellent reputation amongst the industry. So again, great training measure is looking across high-level overview of how these credentials are held across the industry, which are very high. Kind of wrapping things up here, I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation about the different types of companies that we've researched and worked with in the past, and what they're facing and things like that, and what's coming down the pike for FM, and specifically what we should be concerned about. And you guys called it, and we knew it, about those workforce shortages, retirements, and labor-related issues. So again, the way a lot of companies approach this is by investing in their employees, by helping them upskill, by helping them feel that they have more value within the company, and doing their best to keep them so that they don't face some of these issues. But we're all kind of feeling the pinch there. Hybrid workplace was also another big impact that's being seen across respondents: sustainability, carbon neutrality, so on and so forth. So lots of things on people's minds, but again, training and professional development relates specifically to that top rated biggest impact on FM in the future. Wrapping it up here, we did ask folks looking ahead, are you going to be getting a credential within the next year? And we feel it's pretty divided. So I think it's still kind of a wait and see, but folks would like to, and some of those are going ahead and paying for it themselves. Closing it out here, as I mentioned, this study was conducted for IFMA's credentials to determine the value that they provide to the individual. We also would like to know more specifically, there were some parts and pieces we kind of snuck in there, but what's the value to the employer? If 63% of companies are providing some sort of financial support, what do they see their ROI as? What are the benefits in terms of employee productivity, and how they calculate all of that and how that factors in? And so if you've got a voice in that, we would love to hear from you. We would love for you to reach out. I put Nick's information there, so please be part of that to make sure the data is relevant and representative. From a research perspective, the objectives we saw and what was achieved is we were seeing that IFMA credentials do provide that immediate payback. Again, ROI was 16-1, which was a 15% increase in ROI since 2017. I mentioned this is the second study IFMA commissioned to determine the value and measure their credentials. So it was great to see that increase, especially given what all is going on. And then the average financial benefit is $5,400 increase in yearly salary due to their credential, and 40% are getting that promotion. So let me double check on the questions again real quick here. I think I have a little bit of time. Okay, so there was someone talking, oops, my mouse. Someone talking through, sorry, some of these comments are long. Okay, so the differences between the three credentials, which I think Lauren will talk through in just a minute, maybe take you to the website, or David.
So someone had asked, can you recommend a best short course to take before pursuing IFMA credentials? I wanted to briefly discuss IFMA's Essentials of Facility Management training program. This is not a credentialing program. It is an introductory training program to facility management. So if you are in a position that is facility management adjacent within the built environment and want to pursue more of a career path within facility management, this is a great introductory course for you to learn what are those daily tasks, key terminology of what a facility manager is and does. All of that information is on our website. We also have a self-assessment tool on IFMA's website that can help you understand what is your knowledge gaps in the 11 competencies of what makes up the facility management body of knowledge. This is at a fairly reasonable price point, and it is a self-assessment tool that you will have access for as long as IFMA makes it available. So you can continue to go back through that self-assessment tool and update your assessment as you work through any of IFMA's training programs, as you achieve any of IFMA's credentials. It's a survey that you can constantly go back to and update to understand where some of your gaps are in those competencies. And that can be a great tool to help you understand where you are within your knowledge of the 11 competencies. Are there certain competencies you may want to look at starting first because you may have no knowledge in that competency. So those are two resources that are excellent to help you understand maybe what your knowledge gaps are, or that introductory course into facility management before you pursue additional courses.
Great. I was just going back because I feel like I took maybe parts of people's questions. I didn't answer all the questions. There was someone who was talking about, after you get some of these credentials, what do you do to achieve the most value? And it's not necessarily research, but something I feel passionately about. So as I said, I've been in this space for a long time, and I've helped, over 150 plus people get some sort of facilities management training. Either in the past, we used to train specifically at our university for FMP prep and CFM prep and things like that. And now IFMA provides great options online, so we do a little less of that. And then we have a master's degree program concentration here at ASU in our university. We have professional training and certificates and all. So again, I've seen a lot, and I've been to a lot of conferences. And the one thing I always find, which is so the 150 plus people I helped don't have this problem, but everyone else who I haven't helped is you enroll in a training, you complete it, and you don't ever talk about it. So you don't talk about your journey, you don't talk about your destination, you don't talk about what you learned and how what you learned is helping your company. And you don't just have to do it like immediately, like it's not too late now to mention it, but you have to apply what you're learning as much as you can real time and talk about it. Talk about yourself, talk about how you are actually helping the company through your training. Personally, again, that's something I just feel really passionate about. It's not tooting your own horn, but you won't really get the value personally from your credentials and training unless you fully realize what you're doing differently and how you're helping the company.
That's a good point. And to Richard's question, he was asking about the SFP. This could apply to any of them, but specifically for the SFP, we're looking to help folks apply what they know back at their job. So the best way to achieve it is, like Kristen said, don't keep it a secret. Go back and talk about sustainability. If you've not been through the new course, which we've just started, there are lots of exercises and examples where you are tasked with coming up with scenarios that you can apply to your job, which is great. It's very, very unique in that regard.
I guess the only caveat there, I feel bad for mentioning this, but I was talking with someone the other day who went through some other training that we have, and it was to the point where his company undervalued facilities management, which kind of relates to someone else's question. It wasn't planful, it wasn't preventative. They were very focused on the technology that they were developing as a company and not, the infrastructure that they needed to actually support and develop that technology. And he kind of started asking questions and, oh, well, here's this industry standard, or here's how this is defined by industry, best in class, so on and so forth. And his immediate supervisors loved it, and they started to see weaknesses, and he started shopping and looking around for other employers that valued facilities management. So caveat there is you may come to find the grass is greener somewhere else because they value what you're contributing and your, sector overall and the value that you bring. And so it's a double-edged sword, right? It helps you become better, helps your company become better. But if your company is not willing to get better, guess what? You're going to find one probably that does. So it's kind of a good problem to have, but it's a little unsettling, when you do reach that point where you go, wow, we don't do it best. Oh, that's the way we're supposed to do it? Oh my goodness. So be careful as you ask questions, because that may happen. Let's see. So I don't know if this came up, but I get asked this every once in a while. I would say at least 5 times a month, so this is great. I see the benefit. So how do I convince my employer? And what I would recommend is, I don't know what's recorded and saved and everything on IFMA's end, but whatever you can get from this presentation and or the report, show that to your employer. Show them, wow, look, see, people are benefiting in all these different ways. They're becoming more productive. They're confident in their abilities. And 63% of companies do pay for it. So why don't we? And then stay tuned for the second report, which is where we do measure from the company's perspective what the benefits are. In 2017, it was about let's see, for every $2,000 spent, there was a 12% increase in employee productivity. And 70%, so gosh, I should have written that down. If you buy the report, you'll see it. There was a 70% of supervisors agreed that their employees were higher performing and more productive after their credential versus those that didn't have a credential. So again, start building the case now. Some employers, it just takes, like I said, poking, prodding, asking. There's also a lot of backwards human resource policies that say you have to get a degree to be able to use some of that money. I would push back and challenge that. I don't know very many people who measure the return on investment of a degree, but I would question it, especially in our industry, for folks who have, lots of experience and don't need that depth of training. That credentials and other types of training, will provide the company better value. So it's just a question of making that business case, taking the factors we've shown you so far, floating it in front of your executives, like we said, talking about it, and then staying tuned for the second part of the research where we do ask those questions. Let's see, there were more questions that came in. Oh no, those are links, sorry. So you got all the links there, and then how can I connect with IFMA staff? Okay, cool.
And if you do want to connect with IFMA staff to talk through what is your best options for you right now, you can contact us at corporateconnections@ifma.org. And any one of the team will be happy to talk with you about your experience, where you are in your career right now, and maybe what is the best path forward for you. And it looked like there were some chats back and forth about preparation resources for the CFM exam. Again, you heard me mention earlier, we have a webinar dedicated specifically to going into great detail about what the CFM exam is, what the CFM certification is, what are some preparation resources for you. So I will go through the chat after this presentation and send you that direct link to IFMA's YouTube presentation on that, but you will also find many information on the CFM page at ifma.org. We, as well as our course catalog. We have a number of courses to help you prepare to understand the methodology of the exam. And then we have a number of courses that will help you in gaining additional training in any of the competencies you may have gaps in, since the CFM exam does test your knowledge and your application of that knowledge on all 11 competencies that make up the FM body of knowledge. And Kristen, I thought you did an excellent job answering the question from the gentleman asking about, well, if you have on-the-job training, what do you need IFMA for? And I just want to also add, it is our credentials are ANSI ANAB accredited. So a third party is reviewing all of IFMA's policies and procedures, the subject matter experts, the psychometricians that make up the tests and the answers. Everything goes into being reviewed so that IFMA meets a level of standard needed for that to be considered a credentialing program. So that third-party accreditation is also going to add value to the credential that you hold from IFMA, because it is recognized globally and it is accredited by a third party. So that's added value as well. And again, it's about that lifelong learning. These credentials are also updated through our global job task analysis. So we are constantly updating our credentialing and training with the most recent trends and information on practice analysis that are out there by practicing professionals, so that you are getting the most updated content out there for the profession. So, all of our training and competency courses are excellent for gaining additional knowledge in the FM body of knowledge. And I don't know if, David, you want to add anything. If not, great, but that is also added value to that as well.
Yeah, it can be an important distinction for sure. A lot of the questions on today's call have been sort of centered around what are the differences between this, that, and the other. It may be helpful to answer that question or those types of questions in terms of what's a credential versus what's a certification. The two terms are often used interchangeably, but they mean very different things. Things like FMP and SFP are certificate programs, but they are not certificates, certifications rather. CFM is. Think of it this way. FMP, SFP, the other core competency courses that IFMA offers are knowledge-based exams when you take them. You read a book, you take a test on what was in the book. CFM is very different in that it's testing your application of knowledge. Yes, you do need FM knowledge to answer the questions, but it's more along the lines of picking the best one from a global perspective. When we run our CFM exam prep workshops every month, a question usually comes up along the lines of, well, at my organization, we would do it the way answer B says. Well, the problem with that is if you answer only from the perspective of what your company is doing, you probably won't do very well in the CFM exam, right? Because not every company can be best practice. So if you're wondering why you might take an IFMA course, for example, as opposed to just getting on the job training, to be blunt, your company may or may not be best practice in terms of what it's doing, right? Not everybody can be the best at what they're doing. And so what Nick's group does when they do the benchmarking, when they do the global research, is to find out from FMs around the world what is best or what is considered best from a compendium of people that are surveyed. All of that rolls up into the course content that IFMA offers.
And a lot of the questions too have been centered around, I've seen a few of them, how does IFMA differ from other credentialing organizations and programs that are out there? And one of the main differences that IFMA adds value to is that because these credentialing programs are accredited by a third party, because we have our global job task analysis that makes up the content and the basis of these credentialing programs, it meets a level of standard globally. So you can take this degree with you to any industry, to any organization if you have an IFMA credential. So if you are specifically in, hospitals and you were to get a new job within retail, IFMA's credential is going to serve you within your hospital that you are currently working in, and then as well as in the new facility that you are moving to if it's a completely different industry. It's going to help you understand that level of standard, that global standard needed to approach any facility from an ideal situation. So IFMA's credentialing can be taken with you if you were to move to different industries. And so that's a great benefit of an IFMA credential as well.
Hello, and
time.
yes, thank you everyone. That was an excellent webinar, and we are at time. So thank you to the audience. Thank you to everybody that attended. Have a great day.